Hello everyone, Alchemist here. I wanted to cover some exotics that I believe are in a rough spot. This will be an ongoing series, and I hopefully will be able to cover all the underperformers within due time. But with that said, let's get on with the video. Starting off, we have Black Talon. I believe that exotic swords that aren't named Lament aren't doing so well within the meta, as is for the specific case of Black Talon, which had some play during earlier stages of release. Admittedly, things were much simpler back then, so the fall off for this weapon wasn't nearly as steep. For a weapon buff, I propose that the Black Talon shouldn't eat 4 ammo to basically LARP as a caster frame sword. I think -2 ammo for a heavy attack is just fine. On top of that, reversal gets a 10-second window where you perform your big bang attack. Heavy attacks that connect against enemies will now suppress. I think that this set of buffs will allow Black Talon to be more than an effective option for it to be a little higher than what it is now. But with that, we have our next option, Warline Zero. Warline Zero absolutely had a spot in this meta. Being able to use it to cover huge distances was definitely this weapon's forte. However, with super skating being very accessible on most subclasses, the important ones at least, paired with that of an Eager's Edge sword, and that is the perfect recipe for Warline Zero to effectively lose its niche. I don't know about you, but I believe that this 7-year-old weapon should get some sort of a touch-up. I think that having Warline Zero chain its dashing ability 3 times after temporal sprint would be amazing, and to have this happen, I believe that the sword energy consumption should be dropped to 33%, and its catalyst should provide an extra dash to accommodate that. On top of that, I think that Warline Zero should have a blinding explosion with each dash attack. This action will theoretically allow it to deal with unstoppable champions, all whilst being able to disengage the enemy with relative safety. I believe that this buff to Warline Zero is pretty decent and will provide the weapon with overall utility. This buff will enable guardians to zip around enemies, all the whilst having the ability to CC everything around them. I think it's a pretty decent buff overall. Next up is Symmetry. I absolutely loved how Symmetry would display its power fantasy. However, nowadays it has seemed to have fallen flat. With a little bit of diligence, it is more than capable of holding its own. However, this small push could absolutely make this weapon go a long way. I would remedy the Symmetry's sluggish feeling by making combatant headshots give 2 stacks and body shots give 1 stack of revolution. This makes it so you're not SOL when an enemy's crit spot isn't readily available. And for the icing on the cake, I would like Arc Seeker mode to jolt enemies. Of course, this jolt damage will be significantly reduced in game modes like PvP, but with these sets of buffs, I think that Symmetry will absolutely skyrocket into a weapon that can hold its own in the metagame, and having intrinsic overload with the jolt ability will give it a lot more use. Sweet Business isn't a horrible weapon per se, but I would admit that it is an underperformer. So in my opinion, I think that all this weapon needs is a slight nudge, and I think it'll be good to go. For starters, I would start off with 15% damage to red and yellow bar combatants, and hitting said combatants will give you a rewind round-like ability. The problem I've had with Sweet Business is sometimes when I'm in higher tier content, it doesn't have enough oomph to finish up the small fry until it fully spins up. So giving it a little more damage to its enemies that it's meant to deal with, whilst giving it more time to max out its full spin would be absolutely amazing for Sweet Business. Next, we have the Terraa. Now, Terraa is one of the very few raid exotics that I don't feel is a raid exotic at all. For the sheer amount of spoils that are needed to put this gun in your hands, I do firmly believe the juice needs to be more worth than the squeeze. Ravenous Beast? No, this is slightly famished Beast. I would allow Ravenous Beast stacks to be stacked up a lot faster. I think 5% per hit against any PvE combatants. This will instead push you to dump over half your mag against combatants to get the perk going. But on the plus side, you'll be seeing it put to use far more often. I would also like this weapon to maintain Ravenous Beats for a little longer, depending on how much bullets you hit against combatants. If this change even results in it needing a damage nerf, I will take it, because for a raid exotic, this weapon feels extremely clunky. I would like it to work more smoothly with what it's trying to do, given the fact that we already have Sunshot as the de facto best room clearing primary in the game already. I just want this thing to have its time to shine. Next up is Hardlight, and to be honest, it's a pretty underwhelming exotic, and to be fair, it's not really its own fault. Back in the day, you would use Hardlight to clear out shields. You would switch to the element that you need to deal with that specific shield and break it. Now with the removal of modifiers like match game and perks like adaptive munitions giving legendary weapons that and more, then it's kind of easy to see how Hardlight has fallen to the wayside. But I think there's an easy fix. So depending on the fundamentals, I think that each kill should spread volatile, scorch, or jolt towards enemies. I think that this is good enough. Will allow it to be the ultimate subclass option if you want to use light subclasses with it. Kind of how Quicksilver Storm mimics its Strand counterpart. Next up on my list is the Manticore. Now, I believe that Manticore had a really decent concept. However, when that concept is realistically applied to Destiny, it really does get squatted down. One of the main issues is that flying or floating around in the air is the video game equivalent to having a big fat kick me sign for just about every enemy in this game. Swooping Talon should give increased movement speed while airborne, and after you exit anti-grav, your jump should refresh. That means that if you're playing something like a Warlock, you're not completely SOL. Have Soaring Fang provide a 45 health overshield on kill. The Manticore wants you to be able to survive and fly around freely in the air, so I believe that giving it extra defensive capabilities might bolster its oomph. Next up is Salvation's Grip. Grenade Launcher hasn't seen much play ever since you had to use it for story quests. However, with the addition of Grenade Launcher buffs that we are getting, I think that Salvation's Grip would benefit from another slight nudge. I believe that Shutter Shot should also make the weapon damage also increase when dealing damage to targets that are slowed. This will allow the weapon to have more synergistic properties with the Stasis subclass and would be more than ideal to chuck a dust field or a turret to be able to perform maximum damage. I think that this weapon's damage is already fairly competitive. All it needs is a little push, and I would likely see a lot of good results coming from this. Next up is the Truth. Now, this rocket launcher is generally meant for PvP use, but as the meta grew, it outgrew the Truth as well. In PvE, it's not really good, and it's not really in a position that I think any rocket launcher, legendary or exotic, should ever be in. To remedy this, I propose that we give Prototype Truthseeker a full court-like ability on its projectiles and remove the horseshoes and hand grenades perk. This will allow the rocket to reach a maximum of 25% explosive damage after 1.1 seconds. This will also give it a little bit of impact damage as well, and make this weapon an absolute powerhouse. Next up is Darcy. I believe that Darcy should have a modified version of Precision Instrument that increases 5% each stack. This means that once it reaches its maximum 6th stack, it will have an overall 30% damage bonus. Not only that, but we're going to pair this bad boy with 4th time to charm, giving it 2 bullets after every 4th shot. These changes will better illustrate the fact that the gun is adapting to the enemies and growing stronger due to each precision hit, collecting information as it continues to strike down its enemies. But with that said, that concludes the video. If you have any opinions regarding the weapons that I've mentioned so far, would love to hear your comments. If you enjoy the overall work placed into this video, liking and subscribing would do wonders for my channel. As of the making of this video, we are 683 subscribers strong, and I would like to at least reach 1,000 before the end of this year. But with that, have a great one, Guardians, and see you in the hangar.